You're listening to the Call Kent podcast, where Kent C. Dodds answers questions and gives insights to software engineers like you. Now, let's hear the call.
Hey Kent, my name is Joe Previtt, and I wanted to ask you about organizing code for courses and tutorials. I know you've been doing it for a while for Egghead and some of your own products and courses, and so I was wondering, what are the trade-offs to organizing it by folders, by branches, by commits? And maybe you could talk about what's your preferred approach today.
That was the call. Here's what Kent had to say.
Hey there, Joe. Thank you for the question. And in this tweet, actually, I'll see if I can find that tweet and I'll put a link to it so people can see replies, because a bunch of other people replied and gave their opinions as well, which is probably helpful too. For me, I've been doing this for almost a decade, and I've tried so many things, and really it depends completely on what I'm teaching. So I think my favorite is to have an exercise and a final directory that I just keep in sync. I've done so many things. I even had one thing where I had a template where the exercise and the final version were in the same file, and then I had a script I would run that would remove the lines of code that I said, this code is for the exercise, this code is for the file. I called it split guide. And it was pretty wild. Totally worked. I think I used it for my ES6 workshop. But yeah, very much not what I would recommend today. So I do like having two separate directories where you can have the finished version that people can reference, and including yourself as you're delivering the workshop. I totally reference the finished version before, while people are going through the exercise. And then the exercise version is just the starting off point. Sometimes it's an empty file, but most of the time it has code in there, and you're just making modifications and stuff. This has also the benefit of being able to do a git diff. You use the no index flag with git, and you can compare two different files from each other, which is quite nice. And I sometimes will make a little script to make that really easy. To compare those two. And this helps me as I'm developing the material too, to make sure that I've added all of the appropriate comments in the exercise file to say, hey, we're going to be making this change and stuff like that, to kind of direct people as they go through. So you're basically throwing people out into an ocean, but giving them a life vest or something. So the comments kind of help guide them that way. But even still, having two separate files can be helpful for some cases, but sometimes you're changing lots of files. And as you noted in the tweet, in the Bookshelf app, I actually used branches, and I've done this a couple different ways. So I think in testing JavaScript, I had some where each branch would be one commit on the previous branch. So they're just every branch is just an additional commit on top of what the previous branch was. And this worked out okay, except for when you need to make an update. So let's say you have 10 exercises, you need to make an update on exercise 2, and that's going to impact all of the rest of the exercises. And so I wrote a script to make that process easier, because now I have to update the commit for exercise 2. And again, it's only one commit that's important for the way that this works. And so I had to amend that commit, but now I've got a new commit. And so I've got to update all of the branches thereafter to update to that version of the code. And so I had a script for that. And what's frustrating is those would have to be updated even if they didn't care about that change. If that change is irrelevant to them, they still have to be updated for their history to be correct. So that was really annoying. And then the Bookshelf app actually had a similar problem, but I did that one a little differently, where every single one of the branches was off of main, and then they would each have only one commit that just removed the stuff or added stuff to set things up for the particular exercise. That I liked better, even though if you need to make a change that impacts any of the exercises, if it doesn't end up in the final version, maybe this is an iterative thing that you're doing or something, then you only have to, this is only going to impact the branches that care about that. But that means you have to find the branches that care about that. And not all of them do. And so you have to look through every single one. So branching strategy, also very difficult. And I will not do that again. It is kind of nice for some reasons, and I had some scripts to make it easy to go between branches and stuff like that. It's pretty cool, but yeah, super challenging to keep things up to date. So my latest thing, and again, like with lots of Epic React, I have a single file for each exercise, and everything can be contained within that file. And for the vast majority of workshops, that actually works, because I'm teaching like specific things about a React component or about a hook or something like that. And typically doesn't span multiple files. Or if it did, I would sometimes just like break the file into sections with comments and say, this could be in this file and this could be in that file. Not very real world, but I was working within the constraints that I'd created for myself. So I may not necessarily do that in the future either. So for Epic Web, what I'm planning on doing, because this is, we're building a web application, I probably will take a couple different strategies. So when we're actually working on the app, I'm going to just have a copy of the app in multiple folders. And so I've actually got some Remix workshops now, and I've even delivered them at Front-End Masters that work this way. So I'm using NPM workspaces. The reason I'm using NPM instead of Yarn or PNPM or whatever else thing that you want is because everybody has NPM installed, and NPM Workspaces works just fine for this particular use case. I may change it to PNPM and just require people to install PNPM, but we'll see what the future holds there. And I may end up using Turbo Repo to manage some of this in the future as well. So we'll just see. What I do is I have a final directory and an exercise directory, and then under that I have workspaces for the app, and every single one is basically a copy of the other. And then they will, if they build on each other, then they'll just be a copy of the previous or whatever, or they could be completely independent. But because for Remix and for most of what Epic React will be, it's an entire app. You're working in multiple files and maybe adding files or who knows what. It's just better to say, this is each one of these is like an entire application, and here's how you would work with that. So we'll see what that ends up looking like. It might get kind of complicated if I say, here's a directory that's like a repo, and we've got packages like sub packages or something. I don't know how you do that. I don't think that I'll get to that point. It'll just be individual projects. But yeah, that's kind of my plan, is to just duplicate. Like the problem with doing the entire project in each one of those directories, you just end up with a ton of duplication. But most of the time, if you need to make a change, you can do a find replace, and that actually works out pretty well. The other problem, of course, is downloading node modules. And I had actually done this in the past, and that was one reason why I stopped doing that. But because of workspaces and everything, that is no longer a problem either. And so, yeah, this is where I've landed for things that are like application wide. You've got multiple files you got to work in, and you want to make it as real world as possible. That said, I'm also planning on, with Epic Web, doing some very beginner friendly things. Like I've never programmed before, and I'm going to learn programming. And so I'm going to teach HTML and CSS and JavaScript. And for those, I expect that I will probably have like individual files again, kind of like Epic React. The benefit of that is that there's very little noise. And in fact, for some of those, I'll probably even do like in-browser exercises and stuff. I typically like to put you in an editor because it's a lot more real world and stuff. I don't like using in-browser things. But when I'm just teaching you programming from the very start, I am planning on also teaching a development environment and stuff like that. But I want to get people... if the first thing that they learn from Epic Web is how to set up their development environment, that's not very fun, I think. So we're still working that piece out, but I think I'll probably have some in-browser exercises just to get things going. And then we'll move into a repo that they clone, which will probably be individual file exercises. And then we'll move into the project mode where it's workspaces or workspaces and copy paste projects. That is difficult, but one nice thing about it is the find replace feature. By doing branches, you can't do find replace, and you have to do git nonsense, and it's just a pain. So I do not recommend branches. I definitely recommend being able to see the entire everything on a single branch. So there you go. I also years ago had an AMA on GitHub, and I got asked by Mark Erickson how I prepare and teach programming workshops that I think might be interesting, and also a little bit historical. But there's a little bit to that you can take a look at as well. Just thought of that when you asked me this question. So I hope this is helpful to you, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Good luck on everything you're working on, Joe. See ya.
This has been the Call Kent podcast. Learn more about Kent at kentcdodds.com and get your own questions answered at kentcdodds.com/calls.